So what I have here is, make it a little bigger, is the night city scene and the way I first shot it. But that wasn't as dramatic as I wanted. So I shot it again with a little more motion and realized this would probably work really well as a stacked image in Photomatix to bring a range of exposure and get a lot of light streaks. And so I did 3 exposures, 1 and 2, and we see the light streaks because my light turned green, and 3, which is 2 stops overexposed. So those are the 3 exposures I'm going to bring into Photomatix to blend. Just before I do that, I'm going to do one minor adjustment, and that is the cropping that we just went over. So pick that, and I can crop all 3 together by having my auto sync on. Oh, see, I've already done it. Let me reset it and do it again. I am just going to get my front of my building straight because that's the most important thing to me. I just want that pretty straight. Because when I'm rushing at night with traffic and lights and darkness, I don't always get my camera straight. I'll click Done. And then I'm going to right click, and I have the most recent Photomatix, and I have the Photomatix plugin. And so it will come up as an export for me, Photomatix Pro. And I'll click that. This is an important dialog. I want it to automatically align images by matching features and crop the aligned result. Now here I know that it shouldn't even need to do that because these are 3 consecutive images of the exact same pixel dimension. When I crop them exactly the same, so they should be fine. Remove ghosts is very important. Not so much in this scene, but if I had some trees that had been moving and I wanted to make sure I got the trees, I could remove ghosts with the selective deghosting tool, and that will allow me to hand select the areas I don't want my ghosted images. And anybody that's not familiar with ghosted images, just take a picture of moving trees in 3 brackets and put them in Photomatix. And you'll see where there were 3 leaves, there are now 9 leaves. But they're all soft and fuzzy like ghosts. So that's what that removes. I've clicked Reduce Noise on the underexposed images only, because underexposed images are heavily noisy. Lightroom will be my primary mode of reducing noise, but I do this one move here. Reduce chromatic aberrations. And I don't need to show the intermediary 32-bit HDR image on the dialog, because when I click Remove Ghosts with the selective ghosting tool, I'll still get that dialog. I'm using a 16-bit TIFF file. I can go to 8 if I want, or I can use JPEG. Obviously, a 16-bit TIFF file is going to give me the most information to work with once it imports back to Lightroom. Then I want it to stack with the selected photos here so that I don't have to go looking for it after I'm done. Export. And what's going to happen is going to now get, not this, it should load the image, not this one. I had it preloaded in the background. I don't know why I don't see the export dialog. Bing, here it comes. This image you see behind me was from a previous session. So ignore that image. Ignore the image behind the curtain. And this takes a while even on a quick computer. My computer's not that slow, usually. I have a quad-core processor and 8 gigs of RAM. And unlike, what did Don say his computer was?
Oh.
It was insane. Anyway, he has an insane computer.
It's at least a 6-core with, what did he have, 16? How many gigs? Yeah, it was crazy.
Up in the 20s.
20, yeah.
28 gig of RAM, or yeah.
It's like a server I have set up for running multiple remote desktops, you know.
So what I have here is my intermediary image. And there are two controls down here. One is brightness. This will not control the brightness of the final image when I import it into Photomatix. It's just for me to see details. It's only for me to look around this image and zoom. And the zoom isn't really that powerful. And it's really not all that detailed. What you'll see is I can, if I want to choose an area that I want to deghost, let's say, for example, the green light had been moving in the wind, I would just click and make a circle around it. And then I could preview the deghosting to see if that's what I wanted, or just to import it. And so that is a very effective tool whenever you have something that had been moving and you want to kind of just use one image. If I had a person walking past and I had 3 individual images of them, I could circle one of the images and Photomatix would do its best just to use the one image and not the 3, while still making an HDR image. Uh-oh. I clicked something I shouldn't have. Oh well. I'm going to load the image that's already here. And so let's just say I clicked load. So now we have the image. And with the default preset that's here, it looks pretty much like our original images from Lightroom, kind of flat. It has more information. And let me just go back to Lightroom and show you our initial 3 images. First, this is the initial one-time image, the first one I shot just to get my exposure. The second one I shot to try and get a little more drag in the shutter. And these are the 3 images in a row, the middle one and this one. And so what we're seeing in Photomatix is a combination of the 3 of those, but without any tweaking and rather flat. So this is default flat image. What I want to do, and where I found I really get good work, is in the exposure fusion panel. It gives it less Instagram-y look. And I love Trey Ratcliffe's work, and I love Karen Hutton's look in their work, and I love RC's look, but they really pushed the HDR feel. I love it, but it's not what I want. But I only have 3 frames, and I put them 2 stops apart. So that's a lot of a big spread of information on only 3 frames. And Exposure Fusion handles that really well. Now, this is where I want to get an image where I can still work with, but I haven't changed everything. Blending point, and you see more of what the blending point does when the strength is turned right down. Before I do strength, I'm going to show you blending point, and it works from, and let me move it to the left, from my dark image to my light image. Do you see what it's doing? That's the image in between with a little of everything. So blending point is doing exactly that, moving the slider, because I'm now working on an intermediary 32-bit HDR image that has all the information in it, from the darkest to the lightest. So I'm going to put it up to the middle. When I dial up my strength, it reduces my options. Watch what my strength does. See how it's punched my darks in? Let me move it down. But it's still got too much of the middle of the image. It's not quite where I want it to be. Let me see what happens if I pull this up. Oh, there's somewhere. See the up at the top. Watch what happens up at the top. I'll go back. See, it's soft. See it up at the top? It comes in. So maybe I want to move my strength down a bit. Just play with some things. And this program, there's no formula. This is I really want to make this clear. You're not going to get a spot in here that just hits it perfect. Oh, that's it. And then apply it to every image you have. Shadows can bring the contrast in my shadows up. I'll show you that again. And in this particular image, I want to do that. Before I go with any other, I'm going to go, I just started playing a little bit with the top. I play with the top two a lot. Those are two very primary tools. But it's the mid-tone slider that really controls, see how we've still got really bright whites, we're getting rich blacks, but the middle's still flat. Let me bring the mid-tones all the way down. Let me show you what happens. See what happened there? It's not the same, let me move it back up. It's not the same as moving my blending point back. Remember the dark image. See, there's our dark image. I'll bring my strength up. It's not the same as doing that. See, I've got our dark image and I've pushed my strength up and it's just not happening. So I'm going to bring my blending back up to somewhere in the middle to start with, my strength up but not to the top. And this mid-tone is a really important adjustment, especially for night scenes. Do you see what happened there? And this is where I'm going to control my image, predominantly getting my darks just before they start coming up too light. If I come up a little further, I'm going to be too far. I'm going to start to get soft. Hopefully that area in there shows. I want it to look like it's nighttime, but I don't want it to get soft looking. To me, that's a little soft. I'll just cover these now. I don't want you to use all of these. Shadows is a good slider if you're not getting enough punch in your shadows, which I feel is helping me in this image. If I turn it down, it's just a little dark. I want a little more oomph in my shadows. I'll call it oomph. That's the technical term today. Color saturation, obviously I can go from a black and white to what some people think is really attractive. And I don't want to do that. I do want to be a little saturated, not over the top. I can control saturation from this image within Lightroom as well. So this one here isn't critical at this point. I know that Trey and Karen have done demos where they prefer to have their images a little bit soft and flat and then really work on them more in Photoshop later. I'm quite happy to have it looking a little more like I wanted. Gary, you can attest to this, and Chris, I think you saw this. This building really did have pretty glowy purpley blue lights on it.
It did.
And when I took those first images, let me do a switch back. Whoa, I didn't mean to do that. It's not going to load, but I hit Lightroom 3 instead of Lightroom 4. I should remove that from my thing. In my first image, let me just switch between windows here. Photomatix. You see the blue, purple. It was part of what attracted me. But then I saw all the other lights. So we'll go back to Photomatix, and those bluey lights aren't really too exaggerated. They really were. Let me go back. They really were pretty intense. What we talked about in our mentorship was, I'm producing an image. My goal in producing a photograph of this style is not to produce exactly what was there, but exactly what I felt when I was there. And the traffic was moving, the city was busy, people were walking, noise was happening, helicopters were probably overhead. I wanted that in this image. A still image, a one of, isn't going to give me that. This image doesn't capture what I felt was really there. And so some people are very purist and they don't want to apply too much artistic license. My background is as a painter, and I'm quite happy to apply my artistic license to an image. Okay. So black clip, does just that. It starts to clip the blacks and make them deeper and deeper. I find you really shouldn't need to play with that if you've played with your other sliders well. White clip, on the other hand, sometimes actually has an effect I like. Some people don't like to play with it. But it can have a very minor effect on just giving you a little more brightness without overdoing it. Sometimes it really overdoes it. I don't know what the difference is. It might be in the bracketed images. But white clip can give you just that little extra punch in your highlights. But this is something you need to play with. The last slider I'm going to show you is actually the last one we haven't covered, is local contrast. Now, in the newest version of Photomatix, 4.2, local contrast is pretty much the same as clarity. Can you see that? Now, I mean, purely as an image for impact in a first, wow, look at that. I think it's kind of cool to really dial it up. But it's a little too done. People do it every day. It's a little overcooked. I want it to still be believable. So I'm going to dial up my contrast maybe to 2. Let me show you the difference. There's 0. And look in the details. Look in the midtones on the building. There. Get a little crunchier. So I just closed down the presets pane because I find it visually distracting. I would rather just look at my image. And so I don't think there's a quick way to see before and after. Is there here? Yes, there is. Preview. Okay, so before, this is without anything applied. This is after. So before, after. It's a powerful program. There's a lot more to this program, but I wanted to show you how I put images together using exposure fusion rather than tone mapping and details enhancer. What I find with this, and if I look in, is I have a nice little close-up loop. Hopefully it'll load. I can see my details, and I have pretty good sharpness and still really believable unsaturated parts of my image. Things that look quite real, quite like I haven't really done too much to them. Here, you'll see it's a little bit more punchy, a little bit more colorful, not quite high real.
It's not way overdone, though.
No. The movement in the foreground is important, even though it's a little wishy-washy at this point. The detail on the building was critical, and that everything else is still realistic. I want you to be able to think you could walk into this. There are many other features and functions to this. I could save this, what I've just done, as a setting, but I'm going to click Save and Import. So anything that you've done that you think you want to use as a starting point, you can save it as a preset. Okay, so I am going to go back and do see this in Lightroom and share it. Hope you guys can hold on for it. And I just want to show you a little bit of the artistic side of what I do. And one cool trick in Photoshop. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go, before I do anything here, I want to do one little trick in Photoshop just to show you. And Photoshop CS6 is way better at this. I have way more control over this. But CS5, most people still have CS5, so I just want to show you what you can do when you're dealing with architecture and buildings. And so we're going to edit in Adobe Photoshop CS5. And I'm going to edit the original. One of the things, and I'm just going to, you don't have to so much anymore, but I'm going to Control or Command J and create a working layer, just so I can always go back to my original. What I'm going to do is just do some minor transforms here. And so I'm going to de-zoom this just a little bit. No. De-zoom. The other way, guy. And I find my lines converging just a little too hard into the middle because of my angle. And so if I Control or Command T, I get these little handles, and I have a transform dialog. So I can right-click or Control-click and choose Skew as one of the things I do. There's different things you can do, and I'll just show you a couple. Skew is one. I'm just going to grab the corner, and I can pull the image over a little bit. I don't want to pull it over too far because it may look a little fake, so maybe just a little that way, and just a little that way. And to save that, I'm going to hit Enter. And I'm going to show you the difference in the two images. Now, I had mentioned before I like the way it was coming forward at me, but I did want to take a little bit of that over falling away out of the picture. So it actually comes a little more forward at me that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do something. I need this whole foreground is bothering me. Now I could go into Lightroom and I can choose my brush and my controls and contrast and saturation and brush this in. I could also do something really quickly here. I'm going to create another layer. That's Control or Command J. And I'm going to play with this, and I'm going to try maybe soft light overlay. Do you see? If I hold my mouse over top of my, I'm drawing a blank now, on my modes here, on my layer modes, I can scroll through them and see the effect. And what I'm looking for is to get my foreground. Oh yeah, there's a good one. Yeah, hard mix.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I'm just scrolling through to get my foreground a little more punchy, because in the original, let me just show you, it's quite soft. But I don't want to do my whole image. See how I lose all my details? All the upper darks have all gone black. But the lower part is starting to look more like a downtown Toronto street scene. And so this is where layer masks come in handy. I can create a layer mask that hides it two ways. One way is to click a layer mask and then Control or Command I to invert it. And so what that's doing is just hiding my mask. And I can paint in the effect. The other way, and I'm just not sure on the level of experience, so I'm just going to go over it for you, is while I'm clicking this little washing machine down here,
Mm-hmm.
is I hold my Alt key or my Command and click, and it gives me an inverted mask right away. That's usually how I do it. I'm going to go to my brush, and very lightly, maybe my flow will be about 10%. Using a very soft brush, I'm going to hold down my Alt or Command, my right click. I can control my size by going left and right, and the hardness by going up or down. Two controls in one. Two controls in one. So I'm going to very soft and fairly large. And I'm just going to begin to paint where I want that nice contrast in my foreground and on my subway car, because I really like the punchy subway car. And then I'm just going to look at this here. I can shift click this to turn it off and on, or just take away the whole layer. So shift click shows me without a mask altogether, with the mask, and without that entire layer. So that's my original. That's where I'm at now. And overall, I'm pretty happy with that. I might want a little punchiness just in the colors there. Let me see what I've done. Just like that. And just along there. Now I know you don't see my circle, you see probably a bar or something funny.
Mm-hmm.
But my circle is about the size of the main front door of that building that I'm working with right now. So there you have it. Two tricks that I would use in Photoshop that I might not use in Lightroom just because I can play with these, and I already know that overlay is a great way to work with my night scenes and bring up some of that detail. And so now what I'm going to do is I have two options. I can flatten this back together. If I'm pretty sure I don't want to come back to this again, I'll just flatten it. And at this point I'm pretty sure. So I'm just going to flatten it or merge visible because all layers are being used. You know, I'll do it. And then click X, and it's going to bring it back into Lightroom for me. Let me choose yellow. All I'm doing is just making two of my images yellow, so that's all I have to work with is between the two final. And so you'll see some differences, clear differences. One of them is in the cropping. I really found that the building was a little too high up, and I wanted more movement. There's just not enough movement in the picture, so I unclick in my cropping. I unclick my lock, so I can just move one side at a time, and I'm going to bring it down a bit. And click Enter. Now I feel the foreground has really come forward. I don't know if before and after shows me that or not. Let me see. No, it doesn't. Before and after doesn't work for this, so let me just reset that. And so there, keep an eye on it when I hit Enter, how the feel of the image has more, to me anyway, has more movement. I want to bring it even a little lower. It comes forward, the foreground comes forward, everything comes forward.
Mm-hmm.
I stopped focusing so much on the upper building.
Yeah, I think that helps a lot.
Yeah. You can go in and use the most favorite tool in the whole world. That's the adjustment brush. I almost always am stuck in my custom setting. I want to control these individually. And I'm going to use a temperature one. And so just to see where I've painted, there's a number of ways you can do this. I'm just going to turn my exposure way down, and I'm going to paint with this around some blue areas. I'm not going to leave it like this, don't worry. I don't like the temperature of this particular side of the image, especially around the posters. Just in there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on my exposure to bring it back. And now that that's been painted, I am going to warm that up with my temperature. And take some of the green out of it. And I'll just do a little before and after switch on that. So done. Do you see the blue that I saw in the image has now been taken away and it's more natural?
Yeah.
For me, everyone's got a different preference. That's how I preferred it. I still want a little bit of contrast and darkness down here, so we're back to the adjustment brush, new, double-click effects, and that zeroes out everything, double-clicking effects. Whenever you double-click one of these things, for instance, contrast, I moved up to 75, I double-click, brings it back. My adjustment brush, I do want to increase some contrast, and now with Lightroom 4 we have clarity, which really helps me define some soft areas. It brings again some mid-tone contrast, color contrast in. And I'm going to tune up some of the highlights just to give me a little bit more punch right in this soft area right here. Because that's the movement. I mean, this is the goal of the image, is to see And what I brought out, you can see that right in let me click down so you see my arrow. See down in here? That's the reflections of a wheel turning, making that geometric design. It's kind of cool. And so let me do a before and after. So this is just my Lightroom adjustments I'm working on now at this time. And so I might do a little bit of overall with this. I might bring the clarity up just slightly. If I do it too much, it'll go too HDR. If I bring it down, you can see the softness. But I just really want that. I can step in and smell this image, and I'm going to bring my vibrance up just a hair. And for today, maybe I'll call that quits. Does anybody have any questions about the Lightroom interface, what I've been doing?
No.
No?
But it's cool though, the tip with the colors as flags, if that's what you would refer to it as.
Yeah.
I've never actually used that or seen that, so that's a cool tip.
It is another way I use colors. I use them organizing. When I am done, I switch it to green. So you see all my done images. Oh, and look guess what we found? We found it by switching the colors. So what I'm going to do with these two images now is highlight them both, because on images I want to print. Go to my develop module. I want them green for finished. I'll click green. And now I'll go back and just see my green images. Or I'll go back and see all of them. And so I'm just going to do a recap showing from where we started to where we finished. I stopped, I put my camera down, I took an exposure, and I kind of zeroed in on my middle exposure. I changed it a little to get the drag in the shutter, to get some movement. And I can always go back, and if I like this particular image with that starburst in the headlight of my streetcar, I can add that in now in Photoshop. These images are still good to me. They aren't garbage images. But then what I did was I took 3 brackets. So again, 1, 2, and 3. I brought them into Photomatix, and I created a TIFF of all 3. And it looks something like that. And then we edited between Lightroom and Photoshop to come up with a final image that we have here.
Nice.
Okay, let me just walk through it quickly. This is the one that we exported the first time into Photoshop. And so I'm going to go over it really quickly. We're not going to do everything, but
that's fine.
Created a layer. And what were some of the things I wanted to do first? I'm trying to get my brain around this now.
Well, let's say after your Photomatix, you had...
Yeah, first thing I wanted to do was the foreground in this was, no, I did some straightening. The first thing I did was I transformed.
Okay.
I did a transform because the angles were a little odd for me. And so to do that, to get a good handle on the transform, I just want to make this just a little smaller so I can grab it, because when it's full screen like I like it, it's hard to grab. So Command-T. It's also in Edit, Transform. That's where you'll find it. So Command-T or in Edit, Transform. And I want to skew. And I pulled this edge out just a bit. And this one out just a bit more. And I found that that was more pleasing to me. So I hit enter and it does the processing. And so you see how it comes more forward to you. It's less receding. Then what I did was, and I'll do another layer, copy a layer, Command J, and I use my modes.
Oh.
And I found that overlay actually, or soft light, maybe overlay, gave me that foreground that's got more of what I want in it, but it kind of wrecked the rest of it. And so using my brush, and I use a very low flow, like 7 to 10%. There's 9%. I create an adjustment layer. This is the adjustment brush. I alt-click my little washing machine. That hides it, so it's the same as the layer before now. And I paint in slowly where I want to boost my contrast. A little bit, just a little bit on the front of the building. And so what I've done is the difference between that and that. I'm pretty happy with that. There was one step I didn't show you. So overall, I'm kind of happy with things. I had 3 layers last time, right?
Yep.
I am going to, this time I'll flatten. Same thing as merge visible, I think. I just want to walk you through a really quick how I like to sharpen an image that's architectural in nature. I want to go to Filter, and I want to go to Other. Oh, wait, I always have to make a duplicate layer. Control or Command J. You need to do that even with the smart layer. You have to get this layer in here to make this work. Filter, Other, High Pass.
What was the Command J for again?
Sorry?
What was the Command J for
To
again?
create a duplicate layer of the background.
Oh, okay.
And the reason you'll see it goes gray, so you can't really use that, and I'll show you what we do in a second. And using somewhere between 0.5, what you're looking for is just the faint details in the architecture. So if I click on this, I'm looking for the details in the architecture. And I see it's linear, it looks like a line drawing.
Mm-hmm.
If I go too far, let me just put up 3 pixels. See how do you see the overlay?
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
So you see how it's become more like the image? So if the more my radius increases, the more the image comes back. I just want the lines, like the contrasty lines. I don't want everything. I don't want all the smooth stuff to be affected. So I find 0.5 in this particular case is good. I click OK. And with this layer, this is important because then you get confused. Well, I don't get what to do now. What do I do now? Click Overlay. Now I'm going to zoom in really close and show you what the control you have with this. Just zoom in right about there. You won't be able to see that much from the Hangout. But let's say I Command or Control J this a few times. Do you see the difference? The Hangout's not the best place to show it.
No, you can see it actually in the verticals.
Yeah. And so I'm controlling my edges. I'm controlling the contrast in the edges without seriously affecting, let me get my zoom tool back, without seriously affecting the flatter spots. I would never sharpen as much as that, but I wanted to show you more like what I saw when I just do, say, 2 of them or 1 of them. That's the kind of sharpening I want. what my workflow sharpening. Output sharpening is different. That's done in my export. And the Lightroom output sharpening is excellent the way it is. And so we're going to flatten this or merge it. So that's my kind of my Photoshop workflow. If I was just walking downtown and I took a directly exposed single image where I have as much detail as possible, this is it. Or maybe this. But this is what I can end up with by knowing what tools I have available to me.